This is big for the Chicago Bulls as Talen Horton Tucker has just signed with the Chicago Bulls on a partial contract. We're going to be talking about what this means for THT and what this means for the Chicago Bulls. This is your host, Rico Greenhowe, and you found yourself on another episode of Bulls Digest. And so we are talking about breaking news as the Chicago Bulls have picked up THT. This is a player that I suggested that if the Chicago Bulls were to continue to maybe make some moves, they would take a look at THT. THT is from Chicago. He did go to Iowa State. And I think just from the level of physicality that he brings, the way he drives to the basket, and also to his length defensively, could help the Chicago Bulls. Now, this is going to be a bit tricky with this situation with him coming in. We're going to talk about that. But first, let's jump into the official tweet that announces that the Chicago Bulls have signed him. And so this is from Shams, and it's talking about THT signing, talking about how he is from Chicago and the fact that he averaged 10.5 points a game over 2 seasons with Utah. All right, and so if you've been following THT, his stardom came with the Los Angeles Lakers. I think that there were times where he absolutely showed that he could be a star in this league. And then there were times where you wondered, would he in fact make it in this league? And I think that is the one thing around THT is that he's just been very up and down. And that is something that was talked about in his NBA draft profile when he came out. In fact, I think he was one of the youngest players in that draft, if not the youngest in 2019. And THT just really hasn't figured out from a consistency standpoint, how to be effective in the NBA. But I think that just like a lot of these younger players that we have on the roster, whether it is Jalen Smith, whether it is a Josh Giddey, or if it's Sanogo, or Dalen Terry, it's players that just need to get out there, get in a situation where they're going to have to either go ahead and succeed or fail, but just have the opportunity to do so. And I think a lot of these players have played behind some players, and also too, the opportunity hasn't presented itself. And so that is the one thing with the Chicago Bulls now, with them pretty much trying to figure out, who their young core is and what direction they're going. I feel like that there is opportunities here at the Chicago Bulls, and that if these players are to just get those minutes and show what they can do, they could possibly go ahead and carve out a role and maybe carve out a path for their NBA career. And I think that is true for THT. When you look at what he brings on the offensive end, I love the fact that he is a bigger body guard, that likes to go to the rim, and he likes to play with some physicality. So I love that about THT, and I've said this before, I feel like the Chicago Bulls need to get players that bring that physicality. So I love the fact that he plays big on the offensive end, and I think that he can do a little bit better as far as getting to the free throw line there. Now, when you look at his stats, which we're going to bring up, he's been around a 40% three-point shooter. That really actually took a little bit of a dip in the last couple of seasons, but he's been pretty efficient, I think, from shooting 2-point field goal percentage wise. And so that's been pretty good. So he's like a player that he doesn't do one thing well, but he just figures out a way to go ahead and really just stack up stats, really. I think that is probably the best description of him. And so another thing that I love about him is that at 6'4", he has a 7'1" wingspan. And with that 7'1" wingspan, I think that is going to help the Chicago Bulls. And this is if he makes the roster, because it's non-guaranteed. But with the 7'1" wingspan, I think that he is going to help us as far as, playing those passing lanes and really starting to create steals and get the break generated, depending on what unit he would play with. I think think that that is going to be huge. I think he's going to make it tougher for guards to drive in anywhere from 1 to 3. I think sometimes you might be able to sneak him in there at the 4. And he's going to remind you a little bit of the PJ Tucker role, right? With the way he's able to clamp down defensively at times. And I think that he's willing to do so. And he's going to have the opportunity to do so if he is with the Chicago Bulls. And so I just think that this is an interesting fit. We just talked about the inconsistency. I think it comes down to just decision making sometimes. I think a lot of times you see some brilliant plays from THT. Then there's other times you just wonder, like, what was he thinking on that particular play? But again, I think that he still hasn't really reached his max potential. And I said it before in a prior video. I think that maybe the Chicago Bulls in this situation might afford him the opportunity to go out there and figure things out. And so as we bring up the stat sheet, you're going to take a look that he has been a player that has gone up in with his points. He did take a little bit of a down take from his year before this last one, so 10.7 to 10.1. But you are going to see again that he does fill up the stat sheets. Generally, he goes out there and gets you some rebounds. He is going to get some assists, and some nights you got to think he's going to be filling it. And then just talking about the field goal percentage, again, like you're looking at that pretty solid across the board, 48% for his career. The 3-point shooting, that does scare me a little bit that it has gone down. I mean, if he does make this team, he is going to have to more than likely be able to stretch the floor. So that maybe is something that could be a little bit of a concern. But if he were to make this team, then you're bringing him in with your second unit. That means that he's out there with Io, who might be in the second unit. You're looking at a player with like Modest, who might be out there in the second unit. Jalen Smith could be out there in the second unit as well. So I think that, he definitely could be a nice piece and an addition to that unit, especially if defensively he's causing some havoc. And so I think the real issue as a whole, and this is something that I've talked about before with the Chicago Bulls, is when you don't pick a direction now and you basically have players on the roster that do not fit your long-term plans. Now this becomes interesting for THT, because if he does make the team somehow, how are you going to implement him, right? Because there's so many other players ahead of him that maybe they shouldn't be, right? And it's because, you have a player like Zach Lavine on the roster. You have Lonzo on the roster. You have Torrey Craig. You have Javon Carter on the roster. And so those players may soak up minutes, and it's like, how are we possibly going to truthfully evaluate this talent, see if, yes, he just needs some opportunity to go ahead and get his NBA career started in the right direction. But instead of getting him that experience, he might have to sit behind some veterans that we should have went ahead and traded and got some good assets back or something back a long time ago. So this is part of, I think, my frustration with the Chicago Bulls. And I think this is what they're going to run into again with this, right? Because, with Torrey Craig again, Javon Carter, you still got Dalen Terry, Julian Phillips. I haven't even mentioned those players on the bench. Like, you need to find some minutes for these players. And if he makes the roster, we need to find some minutes for him. If we have to bring up Kenny Lofton Jr., you got to find some minutes for these players and allow them to learn on the fly out there. And so let me know in the comments what you are thinking. Should the Chicago Bulls go ahead and keep THT for the season? Do you think that he is going to be there past this season? Can he be a player that is with our younger core? He's only 23 years old at this. And do you feel like, yes, once again, the Chicago Bulls have to pick a direction, get these players out of the way somehow, some way, so you can evaluate these players and see if they are going to fit in your long-term plan? Because I've said it before, regardless of who you draft next season, if you don't shape this roster properly, then you are going to repeat the same mistakes that you have already done before in the past with a player like Zach Lavine. You're going to place him in a situation where it's a lot of pieces that don't fit, and that is going to hurt that player's growth. And so let me know in the comments what you're thinking. I just want to thank everybody for liking, sharing, and commenting on the videos. Let you know that 65.6% of you that watch the videos are not subscribed, so make sure you continue to double slam dunk on that subscribe button for me. It means a lot as we try to reach 5,000 subscribers. And even though we're talking about a player that is on a non-guaranteed contract, he may not even make it out of training camp, we're still excited for it. I'm still saying go Bulls. I'll see you in the next one. Peace, peace, peace.